Welcome to Diabetes Day by Day, the American Diabetes Association's official podcast. It's that time of year again, the holidays. Whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Diwali, Kwanzaa, or one of many other holidays that for all of us represent a time of celebration, that celebration occurs during the time of the winter solstice. The winter solstice is the shortest day and, of course, the longest night of the year. Our holidays can brighten what can otherwise be a challenging time of year. But those challenges remain, and we're going to talk about strategies for meeting some of those challenges. I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, professor of family and community medicine in the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University, and joining me is my co-host,
I'm Dr. Sarah Wettergreen, an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Pharmacy at the University of Colorado Skaggs School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. In this role, I practice as an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist at the UC Health Lone Tree Primary Care Clinic.
And also joining us today, in addition to my usual co-host, to talk about the holidays is Aaron Sutton, who is a licensed clinical social worker and board-certified diplomat in clinical social work, certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor, and an adjunct clinical assistant professor at the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you so much, Dr. Skolnik. Thank you for having me.
And now let me introduce Sarah Hormachea, who is a certified diabetes care and education specialist, registered dietitian, and board certified in advanced diabetes management at the University of Colorado Hospital in the Department of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism. Welcome, Sarah.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Aaron, let me start with you. And can you lay out for us some of the challenges that the holidays present, particularly for people with diabetes?
Dr. Skolnik, you're talking about all these wonderful holidays that we love to celebrate at this time of year. Usually we think about the joy of the holidays, but so many different mood changes happen with holidays. We talk about joy, we talk about stress. We oftentimes talk about longing for days past and ways that we remember different holidays. And these can be very challenging, especially around food, because we know that these celebrations usually involve food. So for those with diabetes, it can be even more difficult as we are trying to navigate how to stay toward our track of what we're focusing on. So this can be a very, very challenging time. Especially when we think about the coping strategies that we usually have as they revolve around food.
That's a really good point. You know, it's interesting. When I think about the holidays, I think about the people that are there. I also think about the people that are not there when it comes to food. So often, much of those tastes, those aromas, are filled with both good times and bad times. And can you say something about partaking of meals is filled with joy, but also if we've been trying to be careful the rest of the time, there's a bit of guilt involved. Is that right?
And that's right. And that's where we talk about the moods and how our moods can fluctuate and we'll talk about some strategies of how to effectively deal with this, but how we look at our mood and how it can change in the way that we try to stay again the course of what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Food and emotions are so interconnected, and that is such a big influence this time of year. But I really appreciate, Aaron, that you mentioned stress as a factor. I actually spoke with one of my patients with diabetes today, and he asked, does stress affect my blood sugar? And he wasn't sure if it made it go up or down or what that role could be. But certainly for many people, we see that stress itself can increase glucose, but also those things that come along with stress. Like if you are a stress snacker or stress eater, you might see some greater effects from that as well. So certainly lots of challenges there. So thinking of some of those challenges, Sarah, I'd love to ask some of your recommendations on specific strategies to help with some of these food challenges around the holidays. I feel like these tips are probably helpful not only if you're living with diabetes, but also for all of us as well.
Yes, certainly around the holidays, some of the questions or concerns that we hear from folks living with diabetes shift in these appointments. And they come in and they meet with an educator or dietitian. Certainly that feeling of control, right? Wanting to kind of curate the food environment around us and feel loss of control or feeling out of control around the holidays is very common. And so some strategies that will encourage folks to engage in, as they're going to these bigger events where they know there's going to be a lot of food that they may not have chosen to be there, is to really go into these events specifically with a plan, feeling like they are not starving right before they arrive, that they've had consistent nutrition and carbohydrates throughout the day can be a really good strategy. I know folks are really tempted to save up for the big night or the big day and save all their carbohydrates or calories for that one meal. But I would really encourage folks to eat more consistently throughout the day. Be conscientious or mindful maybe of where they're hanging out or congregating, right, at a family event. If you're sitting or standing around the buffet table, you'll be much more inclined to pick or graze at different foods versus if you help yourself, have a seat, maybe mix and mingle a little bit.
Sarah, can I ask you a question about that? Because it strikes me, I've heard so often from not just patients, family members, and okay, I do it, that idea of restricting earlier the day to save up for the big meal. Can you share a little bit more about that, and why isn't that a good idea?
Yes, it seems like if we stick to our carbohydrate or our calorie goals for the day, that all's well that ends well. But we know if we look at our blood sugars from doing finger sticks or continuous glucose monitoring, that if we're eating smaller, more frequent meals, that those waves or those ripples, right, that follow a meal are much flatter, they're much more calm. If you're someone who is taking insulin with your food, it's much easier to dose insulin with smaller amounts of carbohydrates than if you sit down and you have 150 carbs all at once. You're kind of guessing, maybe this amount of insulin will work, maybe I'll overshoot, maybe it won't be enough. So there's a variety of reasons why smaller, more frequent meals can be a good strategy.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And is it true? I've heard that often when we try to restrict for that big meal, we end up with more total calories during the day than if we didn't, because we're so famished when we get there, we eat more and then kind of feel miserable afterwards.
Absolutely. We see this, we hear this from people that it was their experience. Sometimes we can see it in their glucose data if they're going to share that with us at their appointments.
And then other thoughts that you have about how to organize that day.
Yes, certainly the beverages are a big component. In general, we try to steer folks away from sugar sweetened beverages, just not a lot of other nutrients, and they go down very quickly. There can be a lot of extra yummy beverages right at those holiday gatherings. So sticking with your clear liquids, your sugar-free or calorie-free liquids, whether or not you want to choose to drink, that's up to you. I probably would defer to Aaron on that one, but that can impair our inhibitions, right? And sometimes stay in control of what we're eating and what we're planning ahead to eat.
Sarah, the other thing I think I hear from people often is around the holidays, especially associating foods as good or bad. So some people I see for diabetes might come back and say, oh, Saturday was my holiday party. I was really bad that day. Maybe Sarah, I'd like to hear your thoughts first on how you might respond to that as a dietitian, and then maybe shifting to Aaron from that guilt perspective of how you both might manage that conversation.
From a dietitian perspective, it's sad to hear. I don't like to hear that food is bad. Food is really good. Food is nutritious and nourishing, serves a lot of roles and purposes in our life. I like to think is food more functional, right? Foods that are quickly digesting, maybe higher sugar, are functional. They are really great for treating lows. Foods that are more hearty, have more fiber, slower digesting, are great for keeping us full and satisfied. So we can think of foods as their function, right? I'm eating this food for this reason, and if it's a special event, then that in itself can be enough.
Exactly. That's the exact dialogue I try to have with the people that I work with who have diabetes, is taking away some of that self-inflicted stigma around food of, we're focused on the nutritional content, what's in the food, not is it in a good or bad column on some sort of chart. Erin, thinking from your perspective, if someone does have some of these feelings toward food or some guilt around food, how might you navigate that conversation?
And that's such a strong word, right? Guilt. And typically with guilt, we talk about shoulds, right? I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that. And really, when we have those negative feelings, it's not going to drive us toward a more positive behavior. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about what Sarah said, in looking at options, is I love this concept about I don't versus I can't, right? When we say I can't, it's limiting, right? I can't do this because of so and so, or I don't do this because it doesn't really reflect my values, right? And so typically from a mental point of view, if we say I don't, it's given us the empowerment based on our values to say, I don't have alcoholic drinks, after 7 because I know it affects my sleep and it can affect my blood sugar in a lot of negative impacting way. So really trying to give people that empowerment of you can go out and you can have this socialization, you can be a part of the joyous event, and you can say, this is what I'm going to do and this is what I'm not going to do. I love that method.
But when things happen, and they undoubtedly will, I like to think about the analogy of a flat tire. When we're driving in our car and a tire goes out, we get out and we change that tire. We don't pop the other 3 to make it match the one. We simply change it and carry on about our day. And I love that analogy, especially as we're thinking about how our actions have been through a day, and perhaps we've eaten too much for breakfast or lunch, and we have this mindset that, my day is shot already. I'm going to go ahead now and have whatever I like. And that shouldn't be the case, right? We should really look at what we've done so far, again, change the tire and carry on through our day. This is especially true as we're talking about the holiday season and being around parties where we have an abundance of appetizers and main courses and desserts. And we really should look at it and say, here's what I'm going to do. This is, again, sticking to my plan. And here's how we're going to go forward with it.
So really try to structure that eating. And then I think we're talking about those meals and Dr. Skolnik, I believe you had mentioned about, hey, I'm not going to eat as much during the day because we're going to have this large celebration tonight. But remember what your routines are and how well you feel when your routine is going well and how you may feel if it doesn't. Again, also during this time of year, I think it's very important, right? We stay out late, we're having a good time, but remember that sleep can affect us as well as we're trying to rest and recover. So it's very important to think about food and sleep along those same lines. And remember that we are problem solvers, right? We're going to have a lot of challenges, have a lot of stress, and sit and be preemptive in this and say, you know what, I'm really going to try my best to look at the pros and cons of this and how I can best problem solve.
I love the idea of both planning for success, but recognizing the likelihood that we are imperfect, right? And that analogy of that flat tire is so perfect because we will, there's going to be potholes in the road. We're going to have problems, and then we need to move forward. And it's such a good conceptual way to be able to move forward. Sarah, do you have any thoughts about strategies for navigating some of the food challenges that we will encounter?
Another, I think, issue that comes up a lot in appointments around this time of year is sort of the anxiety of the anticipation of getting together with family who may or may not know that you have this diagnosis. Some of these folks are very helpful, if they can be very helpful, and some are not. And those that aren't as helpful, we refer to them as the diabetes police. So sometimes doing some strategy building around how are we going to navigate friends and family who really want to tell you what to eat, how to eat, where to eat it, can be effective in sort of managing some of this anxiety that goes along with these big events.
Sarah,
Yeah.
that's such an important idea. And any thoughts you or Aaron, you have about how do you handle that when someone's saying, do you think you really should go back for those seconds? Or do you really want to have whatever it is that you made a decision? You're going to have some. How do you handle that? Any suggestions to our listeners about how to handle that awkward situation?
I can say for our strategy building and our appointments, we'll do a little bit of role playing in some instances, and then we'll do some planning or preparing on what folks can have, right? What's on the docket or what's on the plate for them that is appropriate, and how are they going to state just that? Guess what? I had this conversation with my care team and they said, I can eat this. I can enjoy this. I've already discussed this with my care team and it's okay. So that's one strategy.
I love the idea of role playing because sometimes we need the language to respond. Thank you for your input, but I can take care of this myself, or thank you for my input. I've talked about this with my doctor, my dietitian. I know what I'm doing. Aaron, any thoughts that you have on that?
You're right, and it is an awkward conversation to have, and it is coming from a place of caring, although it probably doesn't come out that way, right? It is more as a diabetes police, as Sarah was saying. But I think it's important, again, to talk about values, right? And for you to say, you know what, I have spoken to some other people about this. Here's how I'm managing the holidays, and this can certainly be part of that as well. And because again, you know what you and your care team have discussed, you know where your values are in this, and you know exactly what you're doing.
I agree with you, Erin. I loved something that you said earlier. I recently read a book related to habits, and one of the concepts was so similar to what you said earlier of focusing on your values, of not saying, I can't do this, making it part of who you are, of as a person, I eat these types of foods and I eat a variety of foods. And sometimes they are higher in carb and fat and sugar, and sometimes they are full of fiber and lean protein. And all of that can be part of the balance of who you are as a person living with diabetes. So not losing track of who you are, but keeping those values together as you go through this challenging time. And hopefully being strong in those values will keep you firm if you get some of those external pressures. Even already going through Thanksgiving holidays, some of us might have experienced those comments or heard things from friends and family with those good intentions, but sometimes they don't land well. So it's good to have that strength inside of you as you hear those.
We only have a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to go around and ask each one of us if there are any summary statements, any thoughts we'd like to leave our listeners with. Sarah, can I ask you to go first?
Yes, I would encourage the community listening today to really give yourself permission to enjoy this time with family, enjoy these foods. These foods don't come onto our plates very often. So, give yourself some grace and some permission, and certainly come prepared with a strategy.
Aaron?
I think I'm going to talk about values again, and the values in the sense that knowing what's important for us in the management of our diabetes, but also in the values of how we are experiencing the holidays with others, right? We do want to enjoy this time of year. It is going to be very stressful, but we do want to realize that this can be a very joyous time of year as well.
Sarah Wettergreen.
I echo the comments said so far. I also would encourage individuals listening to stay positive, even though this can be a stressful time for many reasons, the food sources, the hustle and bustle, the many different events, the comments that might come your way that are meant to be loving but don't always feel that way. It can just be a tough time, even if it's meant to be a time of happiness. So just facing those feelings as they come, embracing where you are at the moment, and continuing to stay positive as you move forward, because a new year is not too far away.
I guess what do I have to add? What I have to add is that it's such an important time of year and there's so many challenges. And in addition to everything said, I'm going to suggest to all of us participating in this program and all of our listeners, as we begin the day, to spend a couple of minutes quietly just thinking about gratitude. what we appreciate, what we're thankful for, because there are so many things to be thankful for this time of year. The family, the friends, we recognize the challenges. And to end the day that way, after the celebration is over, as the house quiets down, to stand back and either with a partner, a loved one, or alone, just quietly think about not any indiscretions that we may have done. The flat tire is perfect, but we've now moved forward, and think about what we have to be thankful for, because there is so much to be thankful for. And Aaron, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Skolnik.
Sarah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And my co-host, Sarah Wettergreen, as always, thank you.
Of course, it's been fun to get to work with you in 2022, and I'm excited for the upcoming year.
That's right. We are looking forward to 2023, and we are going to start 2023 with, I know you could have guessed it, we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions, the promise and the peril. For the American Diabetes Association, I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik. Thanks for listening.